Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Easy Mini Painting with me, Christopher Ridge. And we are going to be moving on to the Temple Guardians here from the Mansions of Madness expansion, Path of the Serpent. These are actually really simple to paint. There's not a lot to them. It's basically just going to be a few layers of stuff, and you're going to be doing some dry brushing effects with the eyes and with the different skin tones and all that. But it should be a pretty straightforward one. So why don't we just stop talking? Why don't we just get started here? So the very first thing that I did was I started with a layer of army green. I just use that as a base coat. You can do that as like a base coat, or you can use a spray-on primer. If you bought the Army Paint or Mega Paint set, then you've only got it as the actual paint, and you would basically use it as a brush-on primer. After that, we're going to get right into some Desert Yellow here, and we're going to do some lazy detail painting. And what I mean by that is we're just going to take out a big fat dry brush like this. Hey, Toki. I don't know if that meow picked up on camera or not, but it would be cute if it was. Oh, I know that one picked up. But we'll just take out a big fat brush like that, big fat, sort of chisel brush, or you could use an actual dry brush, whatever you prefer. I just kind of figured that this big nasty brush right here would help to make the whole process go a little bit easier. And then we're just going to go over the entirety of each one after we've done a base coat of that army green. And I think that this will give it that sort of like stone texture that we're looking for. I think that will give it this sort of like, almost limestone, maybe like a Latin American stone kind of thing, where it'll have this sort of like green tint with a little bit of a yellow sort of flavor to it. So we'll just do that over the entirety of each of their skin tones. One thing that's just kind of interesting is that you can kind of see a little bit of a molding imperfection right there, and I think that the other one has the exact same thing. Yeah, the other one has the same thing. You can see it's sort of like circle there that's on like maybe the right side of his abdomen. I don't really know what part of the body you would call that, but I think that that's just a molding imperfection. I think it's because these particular miniatures were 3D printed rather than like sculpt and then like cast in a sort of like plastic molding, which I think is kind of how they used to do a lot of these types of miniatures. And I think one of the reasons why the Mansions of Madness miniatures got so much better with the different expansion packs is because they changed their molding process. I think that I'm just guessing here, I really have no idea, but I'm guessing that they went to a 3D printing process, which just kind of helps to really accentuate the details and get rid of all of those nasty little imperfections and nooks and crannies. You get a few like sort of obvious things there, like, what's that guy right there? It's fine though, it's not a big deal whatsoever. If anything, it kind of just goes with the aesthetic of it being a big stone statue that I think is what it's supposed to be. Yeah, just a fun little thing to sort of like look at and think about if you want to sort of think about the process of sculpting miniatures or molding miniatures or anything like that. I know that a lot of board game companies anymore are moving on to 3D printing. Probably a little bit more efficient, but just a fun little thing to think about. Really has nothing to do with painting miniatures. I'm just thinking out loud. All right, a little bit something like that, and you can kind of see just a comparison one next to the other. It's not, the most effective way. I mean, like, I don't know. It's not the way to get the most precise, most beautiful details, but if you do a big dry brushing technique like this, then it is probably one of the easiest ways to get some cool color variation and some shade variation there. So we're just going to do that with both of them. All right, and there we go. So now we've got the nice army green sort of base coats, and then the nice desert yellow dry brushing. So I'm gonna rinse off my brush completely. After that, we're gonna get right into some skeleton bone, and then what we're gonna do is basically the same kind of thing, but rather than go over the entirety of each miniature, what we're gonna do is just kind of go over some spots, just to kind of give a little bit of variety, a little bit of a sort of organic stone-like look to it, where there's some maybe some color variation. Again, you don't want to go over the entire thing. Maybe just pick like some prominent spots. Like I'm doing right here is I'm just kind of going over this spot on the shoulder right here. And I'm just gonna sort of go over that repeatedly, and that will sort of give some extra sort of fairness to that spot. And then what we'll do is we'll just do the same thing to a spot down here. And again, that's just going to add a little bit of color variation. Nothing too dramatic, but just a little bit. And then I'll just pick a spot, again, it doesn't really matter. Let's just do like the forearm right here. And this, like I said, just adds a little bit of variety. You don't want to go across the entire miniature like we did with the Desert Yellow, but this will just add some nice flavor, some nice variation. If you just pick a few spots here and there, and you just go over those spots with some skeleton bone. There you go, and like I said, that just adds a little bit of color variation to it. Just like that. Again, you've still got that nice desert yellow, but you've also got some sort of fair spots on there that makes it look sort of like a marbled stone. And I think that that's pretty cool. So we'll just do the same thing with the other one. Again, just sort of pick some random spots, doesn't matter, just whatever floats your boat, whatever you're feeling, whatever is looking prominent to you, whatever you're like, you know what, I kind of want that to be a little bit fairer. Just do whatever. The only thing is that I would say just exercise a little bit of restraint. You don't want to go over the entirety of the sort of skin tone, because then you're not going to get any of that desert yellow that we went over initially at all. This is just to add some variation. That's it. So don't go over the whole thing, just pick and choose some spots and have some fun. Take some artistic liberties. Just do whatever comes naturally to you. There we go, so that's pretty cool. And now we've got some cool sort of like marbled serpent men. Maybe I'll go over the face a little bit more with this one. Again, just whatever feels naturally correct to you in the moment. That will do just fine. So that's pretty cool. So now I'm going to rinse that brush completely off. Then we're going to dive right into some weapon bronze, and we're going to use that for the big, cool sort of like chains that they're holding. And I think that if you go with bronze for these colors, or for, as a color for these chains, I think that will be sort of like thematically appropriate. I think that the color will be sort of on point there. You can use, gunmetal, you can use like a steel color, whatever you prefer, but I think that weapon bronze will work quite nicely for these chains. So I'm just going to go over the entirety of each of these chains with weapon bronze, and then after that, guess what? We're almost done, because these are really easy miniatures to paint. These ones are pretty straightforward. But you can kind of look at them as like, these are big bad monsters. They're real big and gnarly. But big monsters don't necessarily mean difficult paint jobs. They're only difficult if you make them difficult. So if you look at it and you're like, you know what, I kind of want to just knock these guys out somewhat quickly and want to do something really simple, really easy, and I think that this whole color scheme that we're doing here will work out just fine. There we go, so that's one chain down, and that looks pretty darn cool. So we're just gonna do the same thing with the other one. Yeah, I think that sort of like color scheme goes with the sort of like army green and desert yellow that we did already. So I think that has worked out pretty darn well, if I don't say so myself. Alright, and now we've got the bronze color for their chains completely done. Next up, just get right into some dark tone, which is basically just an all black sort of quick shade or all black shade or wash. And then I'll just take some big fat no-name brush just like this. I don't even care. I'll get a little bit of water onto it, so I'll dip the tip in just a little bit of water. And then we'll kind of mix that in until it gets to a sort of consistency that I want. So we'll kind of thin that down a little bit more, even more so than it already is because it's pretty thin. So we got a nice even consistency there. That looks pretty good. And then we'll just go over the entirety of each miniature, and that will just fill in all of the details, all of the little shades, all of the little cracks, all of the nooks and crannies, the little tiny crevices throughout the entirety of each miniature. And if you don't have the Army Painter Mega Paint set, like if you've got all Citadel brand paints, this would basically just be Nuln Oil. Again, just an all black shade, all black quick shade or wash or whatever. And this will just help to fill in all of the shade and detail that we want. As you can see, it's really, really bringing it out there. It's kind of giving us a nice, cool, sort of lived-in, fleshy,
well, not fleshy, but, you know, a lived-in stone-like look. And if you don't like the all-black sort of color scheme, then or the all-black wash, then you don't have to stick with it. I would say that Agrak's Earthshade, if you're using Citadel, would be fine. And if you don't have Citadel brushes, if you have the Army Painter Mega Paint set like we have here, then I would say Strong Tone will be A-okay. But ultimately, it's whatever you want to do. I'm just here to sort of help guide you. You get to make the decisions on your own. That's the cool thing about miniature painting. You get to do whatever you want to do. You don't have to follow anybody's rules other than your own. So we're just going to coat each one, and then we're going to let them completely dry, and then we'll have some fun with their eyes. And after they are nice and dry there, what we're going to do is move into some lava orange, and we're going to use that for some eyes. We're just going to dab their eyes very quickly. It shouldn't be too difficult because their eyes are very, very large, very prominent. And just take your time with it. You know, you want to try to avoid getting this on the actual skin, quote unquote, I guess, you know, surrounding the eye. I mean, I guess these things are made of stone, so not exactly skin. But, you know, you see what I'm saying here. Yeah, so just get some orange on there. And that's just the first part. We're going to do something a little bit more fancy too. But this is just the beginning. There we go. These eyes are very, very simple to paint because they are very, very large. So these are some good miniatures to start if you've not messed with eyes before. These are some good ones to start with. Another thing that I'm going to do too with this lava orange, and I don't think this is on the actual tile art. Well, I guess you can't really tell because it's not really on there. But I kind of imagine that maybe that's like a jewel or something on the middle of that sort of, you know, chain cuff thing, whatever. And I think that you could probably just go over that with this lava orange that you've got out, and I think that that will be fine. There we go. Something like that. That's all that you're going to do. There we go. So now we've got some cool glowing eyes on there. Well, we've got some eyes. They're not glowing just yet, but the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to emulate some glowing eyes just a little bit. Now, the only thing about that is that you want to make sure that those eyes are completely dry before we do that, because we're going to be doing a dry brushing type thing. So maybe give it just a couple of minutes. I mean, you don't need to give it like half an hour or anything like that, but just make sure that those eyes are completely dry before you move on to the next thing, which is going to be some Daemonic Yellow here. And we'll take out a dry brush. We'll take out a smaller sized dry brush with this Daemonic Yellow, and what we're going to do is we're just going to dry brush the eye and the sort of like area surrounding the eye, and that will give it a sort of glowing look, I think. Yeah, that's why you really want to make sure that those eyes are totally dry before you do this, and do just a little bit first and sort of just work your way up a little bit. You don't want to start off with a tremendous amount of yellow. There we go, that kind of thing. And you can sort of look at that as a comparison there, and you can see, like I said, one of them kind of looks like the eye is glowing a little bit, and the other one doesn't. And we're just going to do that for all of the eyes, and then after that, we're done. That's it. I don't think that there's a lot else that you need to do. I'm going to apply my layer of matte varnish, which is just to give it, you know, an extra little layer of protection and extend the lifespan of the miniature a little bit, and also just sort of balance out the colors a little tiny bit. You don't have to. If you don't have a varnish, or you don't want to mess with varnishes, then that is totally fine. That is up to you. It is whatever you want to do, but I am going to apply that varnish, and that's it. And that'll about do it, everybody. As you can see, we've got those nice, cool, sort of glowing eyes on there. The varnish is also drying, so they might look a little bit slick right now, but it'll sort of dull out as it dries. And I've also got the tile art there, just so you can sort of compare that, to the paint job that we just did. And as you can see, I think that we basically nailed it. I think that that's pretty good right there, and I think that everything just kind of comes together and looks pretty nice there. And yeah, these are really, really easy miniatures to paint, since they're nice and large,
and you don't need to worry about too many details, and it's easy to get those cool effects like those glowing eyes and that kind of thing. So that's it, everybody. If you liked the video, go ahead and throw it a like. If you want to see the Basilisk painted, which is the final monster in the Mansions of Madness Path of the Serpent expansion painted, then you can subscribe to the channel. But I won't keep up any more of your time because there's not a lot more to say or do, so I'm going to let you get to it. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next time.